Hi, my name is Rachel. I'm with the WSU Extension Master Gardener Program, and today we're going to be going over seed starting. So first thing before you start, what you're going to want to do is sterilize all your tools. What I usually do is get a gallon bucket of water and a cap full of bleach, and I wash everything off. After that, you're going to want to get your supplies together. My standard supplies are plate, toothpicks for picking up the seeds, pencil, and a tag so I can mark what I'm planting. The next thing you're going to want to get is seed starting soil. Now there's a big difference between potting soil and seed starting soil. The main one, you can see a difference in it. Seed starting mix has vermiculite in it, and it also is sterile, while potting soil is going to have a lot more organic matter in it, and some of them even contain fertilizer. Next, for starting, you're going to want to get your seed starting mix and make sure it's plenty wet beforehand. Fill up your tray. We're only going to do a small portion just as a demo today. And get your seeds. The nice thing about all your seed packets is typically they'll have all the information you need on the back. So for this one, it says seed depth, plant spacing, and days until sprouting. So this is a standard Italian kale mix. Has a pretty small seed to it. And for this one, this pack says you want to plant it at 1/4 of an inch deep. So what you can do, spray that down, keep your seed from rolling. And you can measure out 1/4 of an inch on your toothpick beforehand. Put it in, space it in, put it down, and cover it back up. Once you have your tray filled with all the seeds you're going to plant, spray it down. And depending on what part of the season, I typically cover it with my seed tray cover. That will keep all the moisture in, keep it warm, until you start seeing the sprouts come up. Once you get your first seedling sprouts on there, the first greens, you will want to take off this tray cover. The inside can be a little too humid, and if you leave that on, you are going to have what's called dampening off on your seedling. And that's where the seedling itself actually rots at the bottom. You can get mold in there, a whole bunch of not good things for your brand new seedlings. After a couple of days, up to a week, you'll start noticing your primary leaves come in, your true leaves. Once you see that, it's time to transplant your seedlings. Here I have my lone little tomato as a good example for transplanting. So once you get the true leaves in, you're going to want to get a bigger container. I have this one set aside, all ready to go, that has the potting soil in it, and you can see it has a lot of natural organic material in there. That's when I'm going to get my fork that you saw earlier that helps with pulling the seedling out of the tray, and you can dig it in. What's nice is there's little hairs on your tomato. Those little hairs can grow into roots, so you can actually plant this pretty deep down. Plant it in, bury it in, get some of the potting mix, put around it, and there you go. You have a nice potted start that you can continue growing inside your house. Now if you're doing anything that has the little hairs, definitely you can dig that down pretty deep. But if you're doing something, say like kale, lettuce, anything like that, you're going to want to make sure that the soil is right at where the beginning leaves are and no deeper than that. Otherwise, where the soil touches your start, you're going to have, again, dampening off. It's going to rot off at the base. Now, depending on when you're starting your seedlings, if it's at the beginning of the season, so let's say like when I start my tomatoes, it's typically around February, you might need to do a secondary light source versus just putting them in the window. You know, your seedlings are going to want a lot more light than, say, 6 hours. They're really going to be more happy around the 10-hour mark for lights. So there's a lot of ways you can help with that. You can just go to a hardware store, get your standard shop light, hang it above. There are some other options out there that are going to be a little more expensive and more high-tech. This is a sun light. Up until very recently, this would not be my primary lighting source. It was normally for chicks and things like that. It's a little too hot, but it does have its place. If you're going to go with the light option, what I always recommend doing is putting a chain on this light, and you'll want it started off pretty close, a couple inches, and as the seedlings grow, you can raise up the light. That way you don't get leggy seedlings trying to reach for the light. Another thing, if you're starting hot weather plants early in the season, you can get a heat mat to put underneath and keep the roots nice and warm. Granted, right now it is 100 degrees out, so this isn't anything you're going to be using for the time being. But those are options for earlier on in the season. So depending on what time of year you start your plants, you might have to do more than one transplant. This is our little seedling one that we had just transplanted, and this is one that's several weeks older. As you can see, it's starting to bust out of this pot here. So when I have a plant like this and it's still too early to put tomatoes out, I will actually get a bigger pot and do a second transplant on it. Or a third transplant on this. This will be typically done about April or so. I don't really put my tomatoes out until end of May, so this will give a chance once I put it into a bigger pot for it to make a little bit deeper root growth, and also give a chance for the greens to green up a little bit. Once my tomatoes get into the larger pots, it's time to start hardening them off before I put them outside for the season. I start 1 to 2 weeks ahead of my outdoor planting time. On the first day, I put my plants outside in a shady spot for about an hour. The next day, I'll increase the time to 2 hours, and they may get a little more sun. Every day, they will get progressively more sun and time outside. Early in the process, I pay attention to the outdoor temperature. I don't want the temperatures to change too much at the beginning of hardening off process. For example, if my indoor temperature is 70 degrees, I like to choose a time of day when the outdoor temperatures hover around 65 to 75 if possible. As they're in the sun in these containers, I also pay attention and keep them well watered. Plants exposed to sun and wind dry out quicker than those in your controlled indoor environment. After the hardening off process is complete, start watching the weather for opportunities to transplant the seedlings into the garden. You want to help your young plants have a smooth transition as possible. Think about the temperature outside, including the nighttime temperatures, and avoid planting when you expect an extreme temperature shift. Sometimes best-laid plants don't go as expected, and your newly transplanted seedlings might run into a sudden cold night or worse. There's been many times when I have transplanted my tomatoes, and the next day a hailstorm rolls in. If that happens, you need not worry, just be prepared. There are a lot of ways to keep your new transplants warm and happy. Ideally, you have floating row covers that you can put over them. This fabric keeps the heat and moisture in while being lightweight and breathable. If you do not have access to floating row covers, just get creative. I've used everything from mason jars, milk cartons, to even Tupperware in a pinch. So next we're going to talk about fertilizers. Typically speaking, when you first start your seeds, you don't use fertilizer on it. It's a waste, they don't need it. I really wait to fertilize until I do my second transplant. So there's a lot of different fertilizers out there, a lot of different needs for the plants depending. And what you'll see on all fertilizer boxes is a number. So this one is 542. That's going to be the guarantee analysis, and your basic idea on this is 5 is going to be the nitrogen, 4 is going to be the phosphorus, and 2 is going to be the potassium, so NPK. What you're going to be looking for depends on what you're growing. So say like a tomato plant, you're going to want to work on initially nitrogen for the leaves, and when it starts flowering, you're going to want to work on the phosphorus levels and the potassium levels on it. So a good way to remember this is going to be nitrogen greens up plants, so just think up. Phosphorus reaches down to the roots and helps produce blooms, just think down. And potassium promotes all-around well-being, so think all around, NPK. There's going to be different fertilizers available. Basically what you're looking at is organic versus inorganic. They're going to do the same things for the plants either way, but what you're going to look at for the organic is going to be soil health and plant health, while the inorganic is going to be really just focusing on the plant itself and won't add anything to the soil. Alright, so next we're going to talk a little bit about crop rotation. So the idea of crop rotation is after a few years, your plants may not do as well if you keep on planting them in the same location. That's because each time you plant that plant in the same location, it keeps on taking up the same nourishment from the soil until it depletes it. Crop rotation is rotating the crops that you grow so that each time a plant is put there, it adds something back to the soil, so then the next plant will have benefits from that. The benefit of this is it maximizes vegetable yields by preventing depletion of soil nutrients, diseases, reducing pests, and keeps soil healthy. You can do this by 2 ways. You can rotate by plant family, or you can rotate by nutrients demands. Thank you for watching my video today. I hope you found that very informative. I will be adding in some links for you to continue reading if you would like. Thank you.